Pearson is driving the first in a series of Pontiacs to be built by Nichols. Chris Vallow told us about his $7 million master plan for racing.
We're going to have one of the biggest racing teams that ever hit any race circuit. We're going to be like performers. We're going to fill the stands. And you get the fans and you get the promoters. They'll put more money back into it for the drivers and other car owners so that they can continue going on with the sport. I think by doing this, that we'll get the factories back into it sooner than they wanted to come back. And then everybody will benefit from it.
In May 1972, Jerry Grant began his month of May without a ride. However, Grant campaigned hard for the second All-American Racers Eagle for Dan Gurney. Gurney and Grant had a long relationship dating back to 1965 when Grant first co-drove for Gurney in a Lotus 19 in the Daytona 2,000-kilometer race. Grant might have been considered an ideal candidate for the highly sought-after ride in the second AAR Eagle, but there was a problem. Gurney had a fast machine but no sponsorship. However, on May 18th, Jerry Grant was formally announced as the driver of the second AAR Eagle, which was painted a wild purple and white and dubbed the Mystery Eagle. Only the logo of CV Enterprises was on the rear wing, and the company logo, you name it, emblazoned across the nose of the car. CV Enterprises was a company operated by the mysterious Chris Vallow, a self-described millionaire, the South Chicago suburb of Highland, Indiana. Vallow owned property and a restaurant, and was also a Korean War veteran of Greek descent. He'd been convicted in 1965 of passing counterfeit currency and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. In 1970, the hefty Vallow approached stock car team builder and car owner Ray Nichols with a check for $1 million for Nichols to build Vallow a team of winning Pontiac stock cars. The contract that Vallow and Nichols finally agreed upon called for a $500,000 down payment and a payment of $200,000 each month thereafter to fund the operation for a 3-year period. Vallow then went out and signed David Pearson, a former Holman and Moody Ford factory driver, to a similar length contract. Many in racing speculated about Vallow's background. Rumors ranged from him being a secret conduit for Pontiac corporate money to having alleged organized crime ties. While the Pontiac stock cars were being built, Vallow and Nichols went USAC racing with a pair of 1971 Plymouth Roadrunners for drivers A.J. Foyt, who drove in 2 races, and Bobby Unser, who drove for 8. After competing in just 6 NASCAR races in 1971 with Pearson driving a purple and white 71 Pontiac GTO, Nichols filed an $8 million lawsuit against Vallow in November 71, alleging non-payment per their contract terms. Pearson later bailed out at the end of the year too, and later picked up the ride for 1972 with the Wood Brothers Mercury. According to fellow historian and writer Bill Ladau, the contact for the 72 500 sponsorship came through Bobby Unser, who introduced Vallow to Gurney earlier in the month of May. Teammate Bobby Unser broke the track record and led the Indianapolis 500 for the first 31 laps before falling out because of a broken ignition rotor. After qualifying 15th, Grant battled with Gary Bettenhausen and took the race lead on lap 162 when Gary pitted and then held it for 3 laps until he pitted, and then Bettenhausen resumed the lead. On lap 175, Grant retook the lead and held on while Bettenhausen's car retired on lap 182. Bettenhausen's teammate Mark Donohue inherited second place, but was nearly a lap in arrears. While in the lead, Grant's Eagle began to vibrate and push and understeered in the turns, what Grant thought was a bad right tire. So with 13 laps to go, Grant was forced to pit a 5th time. Without a working team radio, since early in the race, he only used hand signals, and Gurney and the crew surmised that Grant's Eagle was running out of fuel. The crew stopped Grant and teammates Unser's stall. The crew connected the fuel hoses, and then Gurney realized the problem was not fuel and ordered the crew to disconnect the hoses. The crew changed to right front tire before they realized the problem was with the left front tire. However, the damage was done. Grant's car had been in the pits for 38 seconds, and Donohue swept past into the lead. Over the final 12 laps, Grant could not close the gap, crossing the finish line nearly a lap behind Donohue in second place. However, the problems had just begun. The 1972 Indianapolis 500 was unusual for 2 situations. One was Grant. In a total bullshit move, Jerry Grant was penalized from his final pit stop on. So he was only credited with finishing 188 laps, which dropped him from second place all the way to 12th. Not only did he lose those places, the big thing was the prize money. Prize money went from second place, $95,000, to 12th place to $24,000. The difference is $71,000, which in today's money would be a little over $400,000. It's a shame. All-American Racers filed appeals and whatnot. Gurney even said, hey, this didn't even give us a competitive advantage. But Harlan Fengler, Walt Myers, and those guys would hear none of it. Interesting part, Chris Vallow. Oh, another situation that occurred. The second situation was Jim Hurtubise. Jim Hurtubise ran out of fuel during the middle of the race. Was towed through the infield, refueled, and ran the rest of the race. Laps down, but he still finished the race. He wasn't credited with finishing the race either. From 96 laps on was all he was credited when he ran out of fuel. So with Hurtubise situation for the MVS team, put miles on the engine and whatnot, nothing was said until after the race. So this is a 72 race with Fengler as your chief steward, and then you got the debacle in 73. So maybe was the writing on the wall? That's up to you to decide. All-American Racers got a check for $100,000 from Chris Vallow. As you can see here, it was returned, non-sufficient funds. I talked to Jerry Grant a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago at Indianapolis. Asked him about Vallow. He says he had a $10,000 check in his desk at the time when I spoke to him with non-sufficient funds. March of 1976, Chris Vallow was sentenced or was found guilty of many federal tax, all sorts of tomfoolery, federal charges. He was sentenced. Also, I believe later in the 90s, he was also convicted in federal court for some more shenanigans. He ended up dying in 2000. Jerry Grant, All-American Racers, deserve better. Grant did run at Milwaukee the following week in the Rex Maze. Bobby Unser won that race. Ozzie Olsen stepped up to the plate. Olsenite, as you can see here in this car, that was at All-American Racers, a mock-up of that 72 car. And at Ontario, Jerry Grant was the first person to qualify at a lap at over 200 miles an hour. And a funny side note on that is Bobby Unser had issues in qualifying, and I had to qualify, second day qualified, and I talked to Uncle Bobby about a year before he passed, and he was still pissed about that. He wanted that. He wanted to be the first. I'm like, Bobby, you won Indy 3 times. You have all these records. Jerry Grant was a very good driver, but did not have even the close to the wins that you did. Can he at least be the first guy to qualify at 200 miles an hour? Give him something. So it just showed the competitiveness of race car drivers and whatnot. So we appreciate you listening to the Traction Reaction Podcast. I'm Steve Zotke. Make sure to please subscribe and like the video, and we hope to be doing more tidbits of history in the near future. Thank you very much.